Hello everyone, my name is PJ and welcome to my new series called The Void. What is the Void? Well, it's this place. A vast emptiness all my own in which I can do or make anything I want in a snap. This series will mostly be video game reviews, but will also be other things like top 10 lists and whatever else I want. One thing it definitely won't have is Let's Plays. I'm done with those. However, in honor of my long yet unsuccessful Let's Play career, I have decided to start this series with the same game, Final Fantasy 1. As you may or may not know, I am a huge Final Fantasy fan. There's like 100 games in the series, and I've beaten over half of them. I've beaten Final Fantasy 1 at least 10 times, and in every major version, including the NES, PS1, GBA, and PSP versions. It's one of my favorite games in the series. If you've never played a Final Fantasy game before and don't know anything about them, just stick around, you'll learn. Most Final Fantasies are JRPGs, fantasy adventures where you control a small group of characters on a quest to save the world by delving into dozens of dungeons drenched in despicable denizens of the dark like demons, dragons, devils, and drow. So basically it's single-player D&D, which was the primary inspiration for the first game. Before we really get into things, I should preface that this video will contain spoilers for Final Fantasy 1 and Dissidia. You've been warned. When the game starts, you're told what's going on in the world. Rotting foliage, raging seas, weak winds, all of the elements are going haywire because the 4 crystals that govern them are being tainted by some unknown force. But there's a prophecy. From out of nowhere, 4 warriors of light will step forth to restore the light of the crystals and save the planet from destruction. You are then given the option of forming your party. There are 6 classes, or jobs as the series calls them, to choose from. Warrior, Thief, Monk, White Mage, Black Mage, and Red Mage. Warrior, or Fighter in the original, is your tank. He wears heavy armor and wields powerful weapons. The Thief is weak in every regard and can't use magic in the beginning, but he has a high agility score that lets you run from battles very easily. Useful if you're the type who can't stand fighting every single random encounter. The Monk is like the Warrior, but minus the equipment. He can still deal tons of damage, but he has low survivability. The White Mage is your squishy healer, the Black Mage is the glass cannon, and the Red Mage is the jack of all trades that does a little bit of everything. Personally, my favorite team setup is to have 1 Warrior and all 3 Mages. 2 healers, 2 casters, 2 attackers. If you don't mind a little redundancy, it might be better to replace the Red Mage with another Warrior. It's also fun to play the NES version with a team of all fighters. For my footage, I picked a different setup to fit a naming scheme I decided on. I'm an expert at this game, so I'm not too worried about optimization. That being said, I really wouldn't recommend a challenge party like all white mages your first time through. I managed to get a party like that all the way to the final boss once, but I just couldn't finish him off. Once you've formed and named your party, you'll be dropped off in front of the starting town, Cornelia. In the NES version, you'll have no starting equipment at all, but the remakes added some. This is normally the part where you should walk around town in circles, grinding experience and money so you can buy all the items in the shops before moving on. After the king tells you to rescue his kidnapped daughter, you'll head northwest to the Chaos Shrine, fight the fallen Knight Garland, and bam, prologue complete. This is a fantastic opening. It keeps you in a nice, safe, secluded little area with a short range of enemy difficulty so you can get a feel for the game and decide whether or not you want to keep your party makeup. If you change your mind, it won't take much time or effort to get back to where you were at this point. There are locked doors hinting that you'll have to come back at some point and teaching you, through gameplay, that the world is free and open. The crystals in the main menu also serve as a constant reminder of your ultimate goal, so you'll never lose sight of it. Even when the prologue ends, the game remains somewhat linear. You're trapped in the Aldean Sea until you acquire a ship, and then complete a little trading quest until you get the nitro powder, which blows up a land bridge and opens up the rest of the world. If you explore a little, you might find the Circle of Sages, who give you your missions and tell you what's left to do in the world. Your first task is to restore the Earth Crystal, and after vanquishing the Lich that guards it, you'll succeed and the first crystal will light up in your inventory. The sages reward you with a canoe, and this right here is where the game finally opens up. Most Final Fantasy games are very linear, but once you get the canoe, the rest of FF1's crystals can be restored in any order. Explore the dungeons, solve the trading puzzles, unearth your own airship, learn a forgotten language, and vanquish the four fiends. On the way, you might meet Bahamut, King of Dragons, who will give you a quest to upgrade your classes and make them more powerful. What's cool is that meeting Bahamut is entirely optional, and you can finish the game without the upgrade if you so desire. Once all four crystals are lit, you'll be told that the four energies are converging at a single point, the Chaos Shrine that you visited during the prologue. So that's cool, nice book-ended story there. It's here you find the fifth crystal, the Dark Crystal, that takes you back in time 2,000 years. Here you refight all of the four fiends in a row, all stronger than they were before, until you come face to face once again with Garland. Now, I'm gonna be honest with you, the whole time travel and time loop thing was really only done to be cool and convoluted at the last second. If there was gonna be time travel, they should have foreshadowed it earlier in the game. Maybe they do in the Japanese version, but they don't in any of the English versions I played. So the complicated ass explanation you're given is that the knight you thought was defeated at the beginning of the game didn't actually die, but rather was sent back in time by the four fiends of the present. Once there, he used the Dark Crystal to send the four fiends of the past into the future, where they would repeat the process, causing a time loop. However, when Garland uses the power of the four fiends to transform into chaos, and you kill him, this somehow undoes all the destruction that was caused in the future and turns the Garland of the present into a good guy. Now, story-wise, this makes absolutely no sense. When you're in the past, you kill the four fiends before Garland sends them into the future. If for some reason he sent them to the future after you fought them, then his death wouldn't cause him to disappear from the future. The only thing I can think of is that being sent through time requires the one who sent you to be alive. Well, if that's true, then why doesn't Garland return to the present after the four fiends are killed in the present? You wanna know the answer? There isn't one. The whole plot is meant solely to be confusing and generate discussions like this one. It must have been considered pretty epic and ingenious at the time, but we've got better time travel games by now. About a decade ago, a series called Dissidia was created. It was a crossover fighting game RPG with characters from all the main numbered titles. What set it apart from pretty much every other fighting game ever made was that it actually had a strong focus on its story, which, believe it or not, was intended to explain the discrepancies in Final Fantasy I. First, the question of where the hell the Warriors of Light came from. In FF1, they just seem to pop out of nowhere. They have no hometown, no one in the world knows them, and the crystal shards they use to relight the bigger crystals don't seem to have an origin either. Well, Dissidia's world takes place in FF1's original timeline known as World A, where the four fiends succeed in destroying the world. At Dissidia's conclusion, the sole Warrior of Light is sent back in time to the beginning of FF1, where he goes on his journey to defeat the four fiends, travel even further back in time, and defeat Chaos. In doing so, he creates an alternate timeline known as World B, where the fiends don't exist and Garland is a good guy. So there's your answer. The Warriors of Light and their crystal shards came from the future. Second, what the hell is Chaos? Well, Dissidia tries to explain that Garland was originally an experiment, created to be some kind of magic weapon, and they cloned his mother or some shit, and that clone became a fucking goddess, and just piling more broken story onto the already broken story. Dissidia even said that Lucan didn't prophesize the hero's arrival at all, but a visitor from the future told him they would come. The story was always one of the weakest parts of Final Fantasy I, but since the rest of the series is known for having good stories, I think Square just wanted to try and improve it. But I don't play FF1 for the story. I play it for the gameplay. I love JRPGs, and FF1 has a system that is both simple and complex, with over 100 party combinations to choose from, different orders to light the crystals in, and since you can't buy every spell in the game, you get to pick and choose which ones to take. It's basic, it's classic, and there's a goddamn good reason why it spawned this behemoth of a franchise. So, introductions and bitching about the story out of the way, let's talk about my ranking system. Everything I review will start with 5 out of 10 points. I will add points for things I like about the title and deduct points for things I don't like. These will not be objective reviews. The points I give and take will be based on my personal opinions and choices. There will be times where my decisions seem biased and times where they seem petty or childish. Nevertheless, they are my rankings, and while you are also entitled to your own opinion, please do not try to tell me that my feelings are wrong. Okay, so, the graphics. Now, I'm not the type of person to judge a game based on how many bits it has, but even in an 8-bit environment, there's still a difference between good graphics and bad graphics. The 8-bit graphics of the original are iconic these days, but that's mostly because these class sprites are the only things you see outside of the game. In the game, you have unanimated water, which FF3 had, so it's not like it was impossible, and all 3 NES games had this weird black backdrop. But that's mainly just because the NES had this weird issue with alpha channels and sprite limitations. By having just a black background, they avoided alpha issues and could have numerous sprites and animation effects without much flickering. Also in the NES version are these tiny enemy sprites that just seem washed out. It's too difficult to make out what some of them are supposed to be. The PS1 version is the primary remake, filling the world with color, eliminating the black backdrops, and really bringing the world to life. The GBA version brightened the colors, and the PSP version took it another step beyond into the beautiful world of 32-bit. Now I know that there are some great looking 16-bit games out there, but I've always felt that 32-bit is where 2D games really start to look beautiful. Every standalone port and re-release of FF1 since has used the PSP version's graphics, and they really are stunning. As for the NES version, minor gripes aside, the graphics aren't awful. There are definitely worse looking NES games, but I will say I really prefer the color schemes for the Warriors of Light in the original than the ones from the remakes. Why didn't they make them all blonde? Ugh. All in all, for graphics, I give it a point. Second, the music. My god, do I love the music in FF1. I love it so much, I'm actually just gonna do a second video about it because I just have that much to say and that many songs to talk about. So for now, I give it a point. Third, the gameplay. I've already talked about the massive number of different ways to play the game. 6 jobs, each with their own upgrades, dozens of spells, treasure chests that you can either go after or ignore, and an open world that lets you play the second half of the game in any order you want. I even proved it during my recording session by getting the hardest crystal first and the easiest crystal last. Watch how badly I crush Merilith here. Unlike some of the really unfair and overly cryptic games in the series, Final Fantasy 1 does an excellent job of guiding you and giving you hints on where to go and what to do. For the first half of the game, there's a dancer named Arelon who hints at your next task. After that, it's up to the NPCs of the world to guide you. In the original, combat was pretty slow, and didn't have auto-targeting. If all 4 party members targeted the same enemy and the first one kills it, then the other 3 would just attack the empty space and miss. I actually kind of like that system, as it makes you think about who's gonna do what rather than just holding the button down. In the original, you had to buy potions one at a time, which was annoying, but there were less total items in the game, so it didn't take that long. Combat flies by pretty fast in the remakes, which also added auto-targeting, a ton of new items, and up to 5 new dungeons to explore. So for gameplay, I think it earns this point. Fourth, story. I already complained about the time travel aspect and how it's completely unnecessary, but the rest of the story is pretty epic for the time. You have a cast of villains bent on total destruction, and a cast of side characters who are there to help you vanquish them. You travel the planet in a variety of vehicles, exploring ancient ruins, learning dead languages, solving puzzles, and aiding the populace. You awaken a cursed prince, restore eyesight to an old witch, prove your courage to the god of dragons, help a dwarf reshape the planet, and recharge the world's elemental energies. Even with the time travel nonsense, I have to give the overall story a point. Fifth is presentation. Only the NES version comes packaged with a bunch of cool collectible stuff, like a full-color manual, a poster, and a map of the world. The PS1 version added an FMV opening sequence, a bestiary, and an unlockable art gallery, all of which were also in the PSP version. The GBA version only kept the bestiary, but it added a music player, which again was also in the PSP version. The PSP version has all of the in-game content, and is the definitive version. For presentation, it gets a point. Now those are my 5 main categories, but now we move on to the miscellaneous stuff. Various nitpicks and things of note that affect the game's overall review score. I never actually deducted any points for the time travel bullshit, so let's do that now. In the Earth Cavern, there's this hallway to the immediate west of the entrance that most players seem to gravitate to. If you enter this hallway, you'll be bombarded by encounter after encounter, and it won't be until a few steps in that you realize it is designed that way. Every single step triggers a battle. Now if you're like most people, you'll think, oh, all these battles must be guarding a treasure of some kind. But no, it just goes in a circle, a complete waste of time. Some people might say it's there to make grinding easier, but there are better, safer ways to do so at this point. Down the score goes. Speaking of better places to grind, the best place to do so in the first half of the game is this place east of Provoker called the Peninsula of Power. In the NES version, there was a glitch with the encounter mapping that caused the most powerful enemies in the world map to appear on these 2 tiles up here. If you can manage to best a group of them, you'll get a shit ton of experience. This spot is so famous, the developers actually kept it in all future versions for any who dare attempt using it. I like stuff like this, glitches that become features. +1. The NES version of this game is pretty damn difficult. You didn't have MP at the time, instead it followed D&D rules where you only get so many casts per spell level. You also had a severely limiting inventory system, forcing you to discard items and come back later for treasure chests. This constant retreating might seem like a good way to get some extra levels, but it really isn't. You get less XP in the original since the max level was only 50. Combine that with the fact that the only way to resurrect party members are in towns and with the life spell, which you can only get after the class upgrade. Not to mention you can only save in towns or on the world map with a cottage. In stark contrast, the remakes are way too easy. You can save anywhere, there are Phoenix Downs now, a bigger inventory, starting equipment, MP instead of spell charges for more flexible casting, and buyable ethers that make magic conservation a thing of the past. What's more, in all versions of the game, it's way too easy to max out your money. That's because the treasure chests in the second half of the game just start pouring it into your lap. If you're not careful, you'll trigger an overflow glitch in the NES version that causes your money to reset to 0. There's a boss fight early in the game against the Dark Elf King Ostos. He has an instant kill move that you have no way of defending against in the original since you don't have life yet. And when you do get life, Cosmos help you if your white mage dies. I recommend having either a second white mage or a red mage. The difficulty is unbalanced in every version of the game, either being too hard or too easy. For that, I must deduct a point. The encounter rate in the original was way too high. The remakes improved it, but not by much. Minus a point. I already mentioned that late game chests have too much money. Well, some late game chests have almost no money. There's a pair of chests that contain 10,000 gil and 10 gil respectively. There are endgame chests that contain regular clothes, the weakest armor in the game, for no reason. It's probably for world building, but imagine playing the NES version and being unable to open this chest because your inventory's full. If you toss a good item to make room, then you're rewarded with this. Minus a point. Most of the dungeon designs are actually pretty good. Long dungeons have teleporters that take you outside at the end. That's a good thing. But one dungeon, the Ice Cave, has a teleporter disguised as regular stairs. They're located right before the boss of the dungeon, and if you touch them, you have to do the whole dungeon over again. That's pretty shitty. These two features cancel each other out. No point change. Ice Cave aside, the dungeons are designed in a way that lets you get back to where you left off easily, since most of the treasures are on optional side paths. The fastest route to the end of the dungeon is the shortest, meaning the choice of going after all the items is entirely yours. It rewards exploration and makes backtracking easier. Plus 1 point. The lore in the game is pretty decent, what with all the different regions and races, the history and culture behind them all. But why does the Citadel of Trials require you to have the Elven Crown to enter? You can't reach this place before getting it. What's more, the Citadel is intended for dragons, not elves. So why is the place watched over by a human? None of it makes any sense and it's never explained. One of the best ways to design any game is to show the player a door before giving them the key. If a player finds a key and then they find the door it goes to, it's as if the key was never necessary. Might as well just have an unlocked door. But if a player finds a door for which they lack the key, they'll begin the hunt. Once they find that key, they'll be excited to return to the door and open it. FF1 does this quite a bit, and not just in the literal sense. There are stores early in the game that sell spells you can't buy yet, and a makeshift submarine you're not allowed to use until you gain the power to breathe underwater. I know it sounds like an obvious thing that all video games do, but they don't. Some games give you the key in the same room as the door. What's the point? It's a point for FF1. Topless mermaids in every version. Why don't you stay and live here with us? Good fucking question. In all seriousness, anything that can dodge the evil that is censorship, especially from Nintendo, gets a point in my book. That being said, lots of other things were censored, like the topless Medusa and various references to religion. So sorry mermaids, but I'm gonna have to take that point back. One really cool attention to detail is how Tiamat, who's supposed to be the last of the 4 fiends that you fight, has different dialogue depending on which fiends you've already killed. They expect you to fight her last, but the devs anticipated doing things out of order and prepared for it. I love talking to NPCs in games, but not when they all say the exact same thing. After an NPC ceases to be useful, or if the devs can't think of anything new for them to say, they all just chant, "Restore the crystals to grace this, restore the crystals to grace that." It's annoying. Finally, and this really only applies to the handheld versions, the optional dungeons they added are really cool and fun. You get to fight cameo bosses from Final Fantasies 3 through 6, accompanied by remixed boss themes from those games. Some of the dungeon floors are direct references to dungeons from other games, and to break the pacing, some floors are puzzles with no random encounters. There are even hidden towns and new lore to discover in these places. The Labyrinth of Time, introduced in the PSP version, has tons of replayability all its own, with branching paths that all lead to a different boss at the end. Each version of this new super boss drops a different item, giving you incentive to fight them all. I love the Labyrinth of Time, so for these optional dungeons, the game as a whole gets my final point. 8 out of 10, huh? Not bad. It may be a great game, but considering its age and scale, there's no way it could be anywhere near perfect. Nonetheless, it remains one of my all-time favorite games in the series. Definitely top 5 material. If you are a fan of Final Fantasy 1, or if this video made you a fan, you won't want to miss out on some of the great fan projects that have been made in its honor. First is the legendary webcomic 8-Bit Theater. Over 1,000 pages of sprite-based humor and my personal favorite webcomic of all time, with Order of the Stick being second. Next is the Ballad of the Mages, a song about the game's 3 mage classes featuring parental floss. And third, the Final Fantasy song by Dwayne and Brando, a rap ballad over 10 minutes in length that covers all the major events of the game, following the adventures of 4 foul-mouthed light warriors. Links in the description. Well, I hope you all enjoyed my very first video game review. Until next time, I'll be here, in the darkness, quietly awaiting your return.